Hi everyone, this is Alan McKay. Welcome to episode 67. We're talking about switching industries later in your career and simple steps to be able to successfully make that transition. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Alan McKay Podcast. Alan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Alan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Alan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on alanmckay.com.
All right, welcome to this episode. I'm going to get right into this and we'll get moving. So basically this episode is all about making the switch into a different career. In other words, breaking into a creative field. So let's say that you're 33 years old or 38 years old and you want to take the plunge and move from the career that you're currently in into a more creative field that you don't have any work experience in, and dealing with a lot of the obstacles or risks that come up. Because for a lot of us, when we're first breaking into the industry at the beginning of our career, it's typically more about choosing that path and putting the time and the effort and getting there and trying to stand out. But later in our career, when we want to switch to a different industry, it's a much bigger deal because a lot of us have grown up and have grown-up responsibilities such as paying bills and possibly supporting a family, all the other things that kind of come with that as well. So you need to be a lot more strategic and a lot more careful about it. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to Jerry Maguire this shit and walk out the door, flip everyone off and start working at NPC or Framestore the next day. You're going to need to be very careful in how you approach everything and how you do it. So this episode, you can get the show notes at www.alanmckay.com/67. So episode 67. And that being said, I will just add in, which you might already tell, I just had dental surgery the past week. I had a wisdom tooth ripped out, and I've basically been on meds for the past couple of days, which I gotta say, when recording this episode, I kind of feel like I'm maybe a little bit spaced out and loopy, so I'm kind of interested to see how this works. I do think there's a lot of valuable information in here, but at the same time, I feel like this has been kind of pretty scatterbrained episode, and so yeah, it's good. I feel like a goldmine of information. You're just going to have to bear with me as we go through it, but give me some feedback. Let me know, did this episode suck? And if so, then I will carefully plan everything out as I usually do, because usually I spend a couple of days minimum working on any given episode, and typically there's a lot of research and a lot of work I put in on the back end for years leading up to any of the subjects that I touch base on. So with this, I mean, I've been working on a lot of content related to it, but I feel like because I've had so much content in my brain about it, it's kind of been a bit of a struggle to kind of get this verbally out. So I hope it's a good one. And like I said, I do think there's a lot of vital and valuable information in here. Just bear with me and see it through, because I'm pretty sure, at least I feel like a good 10-15 minutes in, we definitely get to some good stuff. And consistently throughout the rest of it. We'll see. So thanks again for listening. Let's get in this episode. Again, if you want to check out the show notes, go to www.alanmckay.com. So ALLANMCKAY.com/67. All right. So recently I sent out a survey to the inner circle, into the mailing list that I pretty much provide, like all my time goes to that. And it was really fascinating. I had well over 10,000 responses to the survey. People giving me a lot of feedback, and it was really interesting. Just kind of getting a lot of insight. You know, I try and do a lot of content. Pretty much 99% of what I make is free, and in between the podcast, all the emails, a lot of that again goes to the inner circle. Free videos, free files, free everything, coaching, live webinars, all the stuff. All of it I try and make as laser focused and applicable to what we do all the time, but at the same time getting real insight into a lot of people's struggles, where their goals are, really kind of knowing who my target audience is, really helped me be able to kind of connect a lot more, because I have a lot of theories as to, okay, I know all the people that I've met and where they're typically at in their careers and what they want. But at the same time, when you've got literally hundreds of thousands of people that you're trying to make these connections with, it becomes pretty difficult. Now, that was really great for me to kind of have that insight, to get a lot better idea of like what people's struggles are and where people are at with their career. And it was really cool because I was able to identify that, interestingly enough, the three biggest audiences that I have are a lot of people who are students who want to break into the industry. That was a given. At the same time, there's the second biggest one was actually a lot of the audience were people who had 15 plus years of 3D experience, which is awesome. And that's, again, most of the time when I'm interacting with people, they've all got a lot of experience in the industry. So it was interesting to see, there's people who have like 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5, 5 to 10. And then there were people who were 15, well, I think it was like 13 to 17 or 13 plus or whatever. So in other words, a lot of veterans who've been in this industry almost as long, or if not longer than I have been. So that was really interesting as well. And that was actually the second biggest amount of people was actually in that category. And then obviously other people in different years of experience or different situations, some hobbyists, things like that. But the third biggest one, and this was one that I suspected, but I kind of wanted to get confirmation about this because the third biggest amount, again, which was thousands of people, were people who are in different fields, different occupations, who want to move into visual effects, who want to have a creative career, whether it's visual effects, could be design, could be film, games, whatever. And the reason I wanted to kind of get that confirmation was because it's quite different if you're getting your foot in the door as a student, trying to break into the industry, or if you're someone who is trying to move over from a different field. Because usually that means that you're, let's say, 33 to 46, around that age group. Again, I know this because I did a survey, but I mean, that's exactly what, again, I suspected, was that there would be a certain amount of professionals that want to change careers. They want to go after their passion. That's what they'd love to do, but it's very easy for us to say, yeah, I want to do that, but then make excuses as to why you're not going to do it. However, it makes a lot of sense why. Okay, like we all at that point in our career and in our life have responsibilities. It isn't the same as coming out of school where it's like, okay, let me live with my roommates and, eat ramen noodles and do the whole traditional thing, or stay at home with your parents if you're lucky enough to have that situation, whatever it's going to be. And later in life, when you hit 28, around that time, usually you're going to have responsibilities. You're going to be a grown adult, okay? And a lot of us have family. We have dependents, whether it's our husband or our wife, or even other family members that are relying on us. You can't just say, you know what, it's time for me to switch careers and start again, save up a month or two of pay and try out this new thing. And that is where a lot of this fear and a lot of hesitation comes into play, is the fact that we don't necessarily know the outcome. And it's a big deal. It's a scary big deal to do that. So it's a lot easier and it's a lot more natural to tell ourselves that we can't do it, that we're not able or capable of succeeding in this career change. And it's better just to bite the bullet and keep going with what's familiar to us, what we're used to knowing in our life. And that's really sad, is that you dedicate your entire life to getting really fucking good at something that you're not passionate about, rather than focusing on something that you are passionate about and getting really fucking good at that and getting to live that dream job that we all want. So to do that, to make that change, to have a lot of that risk in our lives, is a very scary thing to do. And this is something that I've started working on, a sequence of emails that are specifically around the subject, around changing your career. And I can't believe how long I've been spending. I've literally been writing for days on days, building these up, doing so much work, putting everything I know and everything I've been able to put into these, and still try and keep them readable instead of, going sideways at any given point. So I put a lot of work into that, and it's something that I felt like I wanted to share on a few other mediums. So I don't want this episode to be regurgitating the same content from those emails. If you want those emails, get on the inner circle. I'll try and send those out again at some point as well. But this is something I've been putting a lot of time into, and already I've gotten hundreds of responses just to the first email that I've sent out. And I'm about to send out the second one at the moment. And, like I said, I feel like it's something that does speak to a lot of us, because whether we're exactly in the field that we want or whether we want to change. I mean, I've had people from Ubisoft and ILM and Blizzard so far email me out of the emails that I've managed to read, saying like, hey, I'm actually in this job that I really like. However, I have my own obstacles that I want to overcome, and this is where my struggles are. And it's just been really interesting getting to speak to so many people. And I'm still reading, and I'm still responding to so much email. And it's one of those things, trying to juggle that on top of building these emails and building the podcast and everything else that I'm doing on top of work and all those other responsibilities that I have. So one of the key things about this is that if we want to switch careers, we need to do it strategically. We can't just say, okay, you know what? Today I'm going to save up some money and I'm just going to jump ship into a new career. We need to actually figure out a way that we can safely move from one career to another. Okay, so one thing I've talked about before, and I will kind of probably hit on a few subjects that I have hit on before, but that's because these are really the foundations of your career in general, like no matter what you're doing. And that's why I also, I've got a much grander scheme, especially with the inner circle, with everyone on that list that I want to do. And part one is attending to everyone who wants to switch careers. So that way they're in gear and they've got that mindset, they've set those goals, but then everything else that I'm doing will click for those people as well as click for everyone else who isn't specifically in that category. So it's kind of like part one of many of the content I'm going to be strategically putting out over the next few months. And I'm really looking forward to really being active on this. In the past couple months, all of you who are on the inner circle, and again, that's free. All you do is sign up on alanmckay.com. There'll be a sign up page anywhere on there that you'll be able to get on this. And for a lot of you probably noticed the past couple of months, there's been a lot of content coming out, and I'm really happy with the amount of time I've been dedicating to really raising the bar with this. So one of the subjects that I talk about is the two-train metaphor. Okay, so this is one that Neil Strauss communicated a couple years ago when I was doing some stuff with his company. And Neil Strauss is the New York Times bestselling author who wrote The Game and Motley Crue's biography, Marilyn Manson, a lot of pretty successful musicians as well as other industries. And this was one that I already kind of had my own metaphor for this, and it's exactly the same kind of concept. However, I did like the simplified version of two trains, which is, simply put, you're on one train and it's going in a certain direction. And this train is taking you wherever it's taking you. You don't really have any control over this at all. You're just going with the flow. Meanwhile, there's another train, and this train is heading to your destination, your goal, your dream job, the thing that's going to get you the money, the passion, the fulfillment, everything that you want. The difference is that one train is in motion, the one that you're on is moving. And in a way, it's actually going to be moving you away from your goal as it goes further away. Meanwhile, there's this other train, however, it's not moving. This train is stationary. Now, the big problem is a lot of people will want to jump on that train right away because they're like, hey, that's where I want to be. But without it moving, without it already being in motion, it's a very dangerous game just to decide to jump on that other career path. So the whole idea of the two-train theory, or the two-train metaphor, is simply that you stay on the train that you're on and you only jump onto the other train once it's caught up, once it's overtaking the train that you're on. Okay, so hopefully that resonates a little bit, but basically you jump on the other train as it's taking past the train that you're on. So what you can get from that is basically the fact that with your career, you don't just give it all up and say, okay, I'm going to switch careers now, I'm going to go do this job, without anything in place, any plan, anything that's going to say that this is going to work out. And I've seen a lot of people do that, and it's so fucking scary to watch people risk everything. And this is something that if and when you fail, it's going to prevent you to ever take risks for the rest of your life, because taking risks, gambling money at a casino table or whatever it's going to be, you might get burned a little bit. But when it's something that's ingrained so deeply in you, such as security, whether it is like paying bills and rent and everything else, or things that may affect your family or loved ones, those are the things that essentially, when the foundation gets rocked, it will affect you long term. It will drastically affect you. And I can say that the couple of times that I've ever experienced that myself, not necessarily because of career or things like that, but things that have gone on in my life. Years ago, there's a couple of days where I was homeless when I was 17 and, still a kid. That meant 6 months went by where I had nightmares of being trapped on another country or something without any papers or whatever. Just weird things would come up. It really long-term affected me. And I've had other situations where it has long-term affected me because you're affecting your safety, like the things that are really deep and important to you. What you really truly value is the things that we probably take for granted. Having food on the table, having a place to sleep, and those are the sorts of things that you don't even think about. I was watching The Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith last night, and it got to the bit where he and his kid are homeless, and they're sleeping in like a bathroom stall in the subway in San Francisco. And I'm basically in the middle, like doing a lot of shit, and I've got that playing in the background. It's just like, this is too depressing and really kind of stressful to kind of watch. And I had to kind of turn it off for a while. It's just like, tonight's not the night for that. But that's just it. This is something that is like, I'm sure can really relate to a lot of us. So I'm spending time talking about this because it is such a vital bit, is to really acknowledge what it is that scares you, why you want to switch careers, and why, more importantly, this may be an issue. Like, what are the excuses that come up? Because with anything that's like grandiose and big, things that you want to do, it's easy to talk about them and we feel a warm and fuzzy talking about our goals, but actually going off and executing on them is a whole different ballgame. And I love bringing this shit up with people when they say, you know what, like, I really want to start my own kitchen, or I really want to start my own photography business on the side, whatever it is. And as soon as you say, well, why don't you go do it? They're like, oh, no. You don't understand. Like, it requires insert excuses. Or I'm too busy right now. I'll do it next year. And again, a year goes by, same conversation comes up. And it's because it's a lot easier for us to kind of think and wish we could do it, rather than going and actually being accountable for it. Because the what ifs come up. Like, what if I fail? What if I embarrass myself by telling all my friends I want to do this and then failing miserably at doing it? So this is like a really big moment for a lot of us. And you probably aren't aware that you're even going to say half the shit that you say until you're challenged with that. But the best part is to actually listen to yourself and say, okay, what is the shit that I'm saying that I really need to listen to? And so a lot of times you might say, well, I would, but I'm very close to getting a pay rise at my new company, or my husband really relies on me for income, and so it wouldn't be something that I could do. It wouldn't be fair on him, or whatever the things that are going to come up. And it's interesting to listen to yourself say these things, because are they actually true, or are you fishing for a reason? I would, but I don't know where to start. I would, but I'm too lazy. Whatever the things are. I actually like the lazy one, because I've had a lot of people tell me that recently, and I'm like, well, kudos to you for actually being honest with yourself, opposed to, non-real excuses. But a lot of these, once you find out what they are, once you find out what are the things that you worry about or think are roadblocks in the way of you going and doing what you want to do, it's a lot easier then to say, okay, well, if this is true, then how do I overcome it? What do I need to do? What are my pains that I need to work on? Because the biggest thing is, when you're starting out in a new career, you're starting out typically, most of the time, from scratch. That doesn't mean that it's really true. Like, one of my friends, it's actually his birthday tonight. He's a reality TV casting director. He's done a lot of shows for NBC and, a lot of the big ones. And he wanted to get out of reality TV. He wanted to get into sales. And, I remember having lunch with him, and I remember him saying that, yeah, the big thing is that I'd be starting from scratch. And, what do you do when you have a resume that nothing on there you can showcase to anyone that's going to count? And for me, it was very easy to say, look, you're not starting from scratch. You can leverage 99% of what you got on here. You work on reality TV. All you do is cast people all day long and sell the shows to all the networks. So already you're selling people to the show, and then you're selling shows to networks. You're doing a lot of this where you need to be very actionable. You need to think on your feet. You need to adapt very quickly and know the requirements ahead of time of any given situation or person that you need to be able to put in your show. You need to be able to know what kind of personality is going to work really well with other ones, and what ones are going to be a complete mess that you can recruit, like Snooki and a few of the other ones that he's quite well known for having brought on for Jersey Shore. So whatever the situation is, like switching careers can be a scary thing, but you can actually leverage a lot. One of the big things, and again, like a lot of my podcasts that I've put out, I've interviewed what I kind of dubbed the Michigan migration. There seem to be a lot of people coming from architecture or car commercials moving to LA, and have this like huge kick-ass skill set around them that mightn't be directly applicable to the visual effects industry, but all it takes is being able to showcase and prove yourself to get that extra step further. So a lot of people coming from architecture, I know at least probably 3 or 4 people I can think of that came from architecture, wanted to work in effects. And it didn't mean it was a very linear approach where you could say, hey, well, I made buildings, now I blow them up. It was more going to be, okay, well, I have to leverage the skill sets I have to bridge them over to the new career. So what do I know? I know modeling, I know lighting, I know a lot of rendering techniques and things like that. So a lot of people would move over into, let's say, car commercials or environments, things like that, where they could leverage the skills that they currently have, and then bit by bit work on the next phase of it. It wouldn't be a B step, it would be A, B, C, D, and these are all steps that you build those stepping stones for. But one of the key things is leveraging your skills, knowing that you have certain skills that mightn't be clear to you right away how they can be transferred over, but that's where you got to sit down and do the work. Knowing at least what those skills are and how to leverage them is really key, but it's also about looking at yourself and realizing, well, all right, this is my end goal, is to work in film, or I want to work in motion graphics, whatever I want to do. I need to at least acknowledge what that goal is, look at the skill sets I have, what can I leverage over to this new set of goals, and how can I angle it so that way it makes sense to everyone else. But then what are all the holes in my story? What are all the things that are blatantly going to look weird when I start sending out my work, my resume, start connecting with people? What are the sound bites I'm going to use when they say, well, you don't have any experience in film and we need at least 2 years feature film experience to work in this industry? All the kind of bullshit that does come up. That's all there as a filter to prevent you from getting hired if you're not quite qualified, or you think that you're not quite qualified. But if you're able to say to them, like, look, I haven't directly worked in feature film. However, I have worked with large teams of people in segmented departments where we have to cross-communicate back and forth on crazy deadlines with fast turnarounds, where we need to optimize our render settings, work with lighting, but also build multi-render pass solutions to then composite, go through very similar workflow and pipeline that a feature film has, and typically in a lot less time with a much larger budget at stake, or whatever, or however you want to say it. But this is a chance for you to be able to kung fu that shit and get it to a point where they say, okay, yeah, I see your point, and it's very well spoken. That's what that's about, is figuring out what are the obstacles, what are not the obstacles, or what are the things that the barriers that you're going to be coming up against. So when you start to do all this, you know what to address. Because typically, if you're able to approach a job situation knowing what your weaknesses are, that allows you to address them before they become an issue. And that is a very powerful way to stop there being issues in the first place. I'll give a good example would be if you send your reel in and there's some stuff on there that when they're looking at it, they're like, well, I've seen someone else's reel that had the exact same shots. This makes me wonder whether or not you did the work or someone else did. By the time that you come in and go through the job interview and you're essentially being accused of that, let's say, it's a lot harder when you're already on the defense to say, well, no, actually, we both worked on the shots, and funny thing happened. The producer was very disorganized. They didn't realize that we both worked on it, and they had myself and the other one on it, and you start going this whole big story, and it just makes you look terrible, which I've seen that kind of shit happen before, which is hilarious. But basically what it comes down to is just the fact that at that point, you're already on the defense. You're already explaining yourself. And even if you're explaining yourself really well, that's what's going to be stored in the head. Is like, well, he did answer that pretty well, but I don't know. But whereas like if you're able to email someone and say, look, here's the work, here's all my work that I've done. This shot here, we had multiple people working on it. I did all the main elements. However, there were other artists who made contributions. Or in this case, hey, I worked in architecture, or I worked managing a kitchen, and now I want to go and produce films because that's my true passion. However, I realize I don't have that much experience, but I'm enthusiastic, and at the same time, I do have a lot of technical background, but my profession definitely is in managing a kitchen, which means that I need to make sure that we handle inventory, handle managing everyone, all our staff, as well as all the external parties and vendors that we deal with, making calls, blah, 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 blah. I see a lot of this can tie into feature film very directly. However, obviously there are things I need to learn. I want to take the steps to do that, even if it means that I'm not a good fit right now. Tell me what I need to know, and I can come back in 6 months and present myself again. Whatever you want to do, it's all about leveraging those things. And like I said, kung fuing or judoing, those things that aren't quite going to resonate well by themselves. This is a chance to give it a voice before they make their own interpretation. Sorry if I'm a little bit scatterbrained tonight, by the way. I'm saying tonight because it actually is quite late at night here as I'm recording and putting together this episode. It's been a hell of a day, and I've still got a hell of a lot more to go, and I've actually just come out of dental surgery, so I've had to be popping meds for the last couple of days, which, hasn't been the funnest. But basically with all this stuff, the other big thing is obviously obstacles. And again, I've talked about some of this stuff before, but these are the foundations of anything, really. But if you're switching careers, you're not going to have the skills right away. You may be good at certain things, but there's obviously going to be things that you don't have. And let's just assume that you're starting from scratch. You're going to need to know the network. You're going to need to build connections within the industry. Getting in, especially at a let's say at 28 or 38, 48. I know plenty of people who've switched careers successfully into matte painting or effects or lighting, animation, you name it. And age is not an issue. However, you probably will be thinking it is, or make it an issue for yourself as an excuse to prevent yourself from making that switch. So one of the first things is to kind of realize, okay, well, it's not an issue, but at the same time, this is an obstacle that I need to work around. Is like I need to build connections and do all this stuff, because if I'm just sending in a resume saying, hey, I'm really interested in learning this stuff, no one's really going to respond well to that, because it's just like, well, join the club. There's 1,000 other students who want in. It's all about doing the work up front, being able to show that you can do the work, showing the end result. I gave a talk, I haven't shared it on the podcast, but there's a talk I gave in Paris this year at the It's Art Masterclass, so 2016, if you're not listening to this currently. And the key thing that I wanted to say is that you want to show the end result. People, when they're hiring, they don't want to roll the dice and take a risk on people or manage or overmanage people. What they want is to be able to know that you can do the work, feel confident that you can do the work. The more confident they are, the more likely you're going to get the job. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the time, people just need to fill positions. If they say we need 5 TDs, we need 16 animators, whatever, most of the time, at least to get your foot in the door, all they want to do is be able to say, okay, tick, 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 and maybe the supervisor is going to come in and be a bit more hands-on, interviewing people and that sort of thing. But really, they just want to know that you can do the work. And if your resume looks pretty and cool, that doesn't really mean shit. Your reel looks great, that's awesome. But if you can actually show that you've taken a shot or taken a project from start to finish and seen it all the way through, that is what's really going to make people say, okay, great, you proved that you can do the work. It's going to be a lot better than showing an explosion on black or showing some splash on a gray shaded box. Being able to show that you understand a feature film pipeline. Even if it means that you're rusty around the edges, you need to be taught some things and learn some things. If all the understanding is there, that you can showcase that you're able to take something through, that is what people really want to look at. So keep that in mind, that in the beginning, if you don't have anything, the key things that you're going to need to do is to be able to showcase that you can do the work. And that means in some cases that you mightn't have the skills to do that yet, and you need to start looking at where to learn the stuff, where to seek out knowledge. So one of the key things that I think is really critical is eliminating a lot of the noise on the internet. There is so much information these days that is actually counterproductive. Going on YouTube, I've done this recently with a few of the guys at Digital Domain. We were kind of just sending links back and forth because I was actually looking online on YouTube for some camera tracking information for Nuke. And so I was looking things up, and I would have literally 4 or 5 highly rated videos that completely contradicted themselves. And every single one said one thing's really good, and the other one's like, no, that's crap. And at the end of the day, there is so much information, and there's so many voices and noises out there that it's very hard to trust anything. At the same time, there's so much information, it's very hard to absorb it all. And I think eliminating most and kind of going to 1 or 2 sources that you can really invest yourself in, that's a really great way to block out the noise and have that laser focus on learning something through and through. And then after that, if you want, you can find another resource and go through that. But doing it all at once, going and opening 20 tabs on YouTube and learning all this stuff, it's just going to confuse you more. And that's why, I think it's good just to kind of find a dedicated course to something or something that you can get. And I think these days, it's a pretty big business when it comes to writing books and that sort of thing, where someone's just gone online and leveraged a lot of the information on the internet. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. What they're doing instead is they're literally just going and trying to find really good resources for everything and condense it all down into a easy to follow book or whatever it's going to be, so that way it's easy for you to follow instead of you having to go and seek it all out yourself, because there's so much noise out there, it's going to distract you. So I do think that it's pretty vital in the beginning when you are learning to try and find the right resources that are going to get you 99% of the way there, rather than just going and looking at everything, because it will essentially put you, to a full stop trying to do all of that. But learning skill sets is a very critical part, obviously. But then on top of that, the part that we don't talk about is obviously building connections with people. And I hate to say it, but who you know is, I think these days I'm starting to think it's a lot more critical than how good you are. It's really kind of depressing to say that, but I think at the end of the day, if you have connections everywhere, because I know people who, I'm sorry, but just are not good and kind of a-holes to work with, but they know enough people that they're able to be a-holes to them, and they kind of feel bad for them and end up getting him a job or giving in and sending their resume, or they just name drop everyone because they know them and, get work that way. And so it's just kind of fascinating kind of watching certain personalities walk through life actually getting what they want, yet burning bridges everywhere they go. So you can have a successful resume of places that you got fired from, but if people don't check their references, then they don't know that you didn't work on half the stuff you worked on. At the same time, if you're name dropping all these people and they don't check the references again, they might just assume, well, if you know all these people, you must be good. And, any one of those people would literally drive to your house and tell you in person not to hire that person. So those are the sorts of things just to kind of be aware of, is the fact that networking plays such a critical part in all of it. And it's not about having fake relationships. It's not about using people. It's not about going and building all those connections for the sake of having connections. But the more you build friendships that are already inside the industry, which is why one very valuable thing about schools when you're still a student is that going to a school means that when, and I see this all the time, one student graduates and manages to get a job, he or she will end up pulling all these other people into that company as well. And so all it really takes is that one person to get everyone else employed and, kind of be the one holding the torch for the whole class. And that's really powerful, but later in your career, you don't have that. Okay, so this is where the internet, this is where other things come into play. I was actually thinking about putting out a couple of videos about this, which I thought about calling, I forget the specifics. It was essentially digital stalking or something along those lines, where I want to go through a lot of tactics about how to find people. And I wanted to kind of use examples where it's let's watch movie credits and literally dig up email addresses, contact information, everything about certain people, even going and using Facebook targeting ads to single out specific people that you could be able to, let's say, have your reel show up on their Facebook thread through paid ads, and just a lot of stupid, crazy yet fun stuff that you could do if you want to be a bit more ambitious with how to build connections or how to get yourself conveyed in a certain way. So let's say that you're going for a job interview, and this might be a bad example, but you want to build some clout. You could start to post some of the stuff that you've done into paid ads or whatever that begin to show up in someone's thread, or at least into a very small amount of people that they fit into that audience on Facebook through paid ads and a lot of that algorithm. So there could be ways that suddenly whenever they're logging on to Facebook or Google or other things, things that you've done start popping up. So so-and-so's short film or an article about you or all these, random things that you might be tied to. And even just like a music video that maybe you worked on that later when you go to the job interview, they'll be like, oh, you know what? I saw that the other day. That was you? That's awesome. So there are a lot of really creative ways that you can actually leverage your influence on someone that you can do to do some pretty interesting things. There was an article I read probably a year or two ago. I'm trying to remember what it was, but I can't remember. It was basically a giant prank that one guy played on his roommate where, again, using exactly this approach of using Facebook advertising, they're able to single out that one person to do something. I cannot remember what the hell the prank was, but it was really hilarious. It's going to see someone using techniques like that to essentially make someone completely paranoid about what's going on because they're seeing ads about things that are happening in their real life and just saying, what the fuck is going on here? Kind of like when Amazon Echo first came out, I saw a lot of videos of people thinking that they're talking to Amazon Echo, like Alexa, when really it's just someone with the remote control around the corner doing the whole Simon Says feature, so that way Alexa would speak whatever they said back. Just stupid little things like that can be fun pranks, but you can actually leverage these to use in some of the business strategies you put out. So again, I'm just kind of throwing a lot of stuff out here just because at the end of the day, what it comes down to is being very calculated with your steps. And like going all the way back to the beginning with the whole 2 trains, that's exactly it, is that you don't quit your current job. You actually use that to bankroll your whole journey into going to a new career. So in other words, if you have a career that is paying the bills, but it is literally just a paycheck, you don't have that fulfillment. And I read this quote today that the worst thing you can do is to dedicate your life to being fucking awesome at something that you don't enjoy, rather than being fucking awesome at something that you love and you're passionate about. And essentially that's what we're doing, is like we have our life, and if you're not getting that fulfillment in your career, then you're going to be seeking that fulfillment elsewhere. Okay. And so a lot of your spare time is going to end up getting wasted trying to get that enjoyment in that hobby that you do, rather than actually getting it from your day-to-day job. So it's really depressing to see people do something that they hate, or they don't, not necessarily even hate this, they don't find to be their calling in life. And all it takes is you taking that plunge, getting out of your comfort zone. A lot of the things that I've talked about over the past couple of years with this podcast has been about this, about finding that trait, finding your calling and going after it. Whereas a lot of people, we tell ourselves that we can't do that. And so in a way, having a job, having that career is actually very valuable to you, because this is a chance for you to actually utilize the fact that you have security, that you have all these things to be able to pursue something bigger and greater that you want to do without having that external pressure that you would have if you quit your job and went and tried to do this without any kind of financial backing. The big thing, however, and again, this is something that's kind of straight from some of the emails I've been sending out, but like if you want to switch careers, I mean, it is going to affect the people around you, because it isn't just as easy as saying, I'm going to do this. This takes work. This takes effort. This takes getting off your ass and going and pursuing something with a dedicated time limit. And the key thing is to be actionable. So setting a time limit. 6 months from now, I want to be in a new job in the career that I want to do, or I want to be on my way to getting there. Okay, so by setting a time limit, it's way more effective than saying one day. One day means that you have the excuse of later on. I don't have to worry about it right now. And then later, it's going to be too late. And that's what you say is, I always wanted to do that. I guess I can't anymore. It's like me saying I want to go party at college. Now I'm 34. I don't think I can, well, I could, but I don't think I'd really be able to sneak into college and do the whole party and beer pong and everything else. So instead, having a actionable time set that you can do that time constraint is very valuable to actually making it a reality. Because 6 months from now means that you need to get off your butt and you need to go out there and get it. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind the fact that by setting that time limit, it means that you are already setting an emotion. Tomorrow, today, you're now going to have to start thinking about this because you're going to need to start setting plans. Getting out of your comfort zone is the key thing. Being able to put in the time, the discipline is really critical. And again, this is something that I talk about in some of the recent emails I'm sending out about creating more time. So simply getting up early, putting in more time on weekends, late at night, lunch breaks, whatever. Like, stop fucking around and putting in the time that you have to actually put towards something that's going to be really valuable. A year from now, you could be living a completely different life, or a year from now, you could be doing the exact same thing that you're currently doing, being unfulfilled. So if you want to wake up and have that different life, then you need to go and start making changes now. So that way, a year from now, you are living that life. And it doesn't need to be, 6 months or 12 months. It could be 3 months. Like, doing the work, setting things in motion is the most critical part. So addressing where you're at, where you want to be, building a game plan, understanding your obstacles. So that way you can start to address them and say, okay, well, I need to build contacts. How do I do that? What do I do? Do I need to go online and start looking on LinkedIn, connecting with people? Getting canned material. So actually knowing what to say to people. Hi, I work in banking. However, what I'm doing in my spare time is actually working on a short film to showcase my talents in animation because I really want to be a character animator. If you say something like that, people are going to say, wow, that's interesting. They're probably not going to say, wow, that's really interesting. So I have a bank question. They're going to say, wow, that's really interesting. So what is it about animation that drives you to do that? Like, why are you really interested in doing that? This is the sort of thing that if you start to put information and tell a story to someone as to who you are, more about who you want to be, that's what they're going to remember. That's what's going to resonate, is that person there. Yeah, he's an animator. He's working on a short film. And he's trying to get into the animation industry, like Pixar or one of those things. You know what I'm talking about. So that is really critical, is to control your canned material in a way that you can introduce yourself to people and how it's going to resonate with them. And I've said this before, but I've got people who I'm friends with, and it's not until I hear them introduce themselves years later, like, oh, I'm Claire and I'm a modeler. I'm like, shit, I didn't know you were a modeler. I could have hired you like 5 times by now, but I didn't know what you did. You've always just been Claire, whatever it's going to be. So keep that in mind. If you're actually able to say, hi, I'm Timmy and I'm a modeler in my spare time and blah, 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 that is going to be like, okay, cool, you're a modeler. And that way people know how to place you. Same way with HR and everything else, like human resources. If you're applying for work, if you introduce yourself to them, like essentially categorize yourself, they'll know how to place you. Otherwise, if they look at your reel and they're like, what are you exactly? I get reels all the time that if I don't know what you are, I'm looking at something trying to figure out, like, what do you want? Like, what are you applying for? Because it's not my job to figure that out. So the more you make people not have to think as much, the more they're going to go with what you're telling them. So if you tell people your passions, people aren't psychic, the more you tell them, the more that is going to resonate. Like, oh, you know what? I met someone the other day. They work in that industry. You know what? We're going out for drinks tomorrow night. You should come along and meet them. Then you make that connection. And then you say, hey, can I come over and check out the studio sometime? Just have lunch with the guys and girls and get to know everyone. All it takes is even just one solid connection with the company, with the people that are hiring. So if you go to lunch and you meet a few of the people, end up hanging out a few of the work things, you never know what could happen. You got to be in it to win it. And the more that you're actually in it, the more that you're actually getting off your butt and taking action, the more a lot of these things are connecting together. So again, I think that's such a critical thing, is to actually keep re-energizing or what is it? Poking the flame. I'm probably getting that. Stoking the fire. Again, meds, I apologize. But so by doing that constantly, it means that you're going to be able to, it's kind of like playing the lottery or something. The more tickets you get in there, maybe you're going to have more of a chance of winning. Probably not, but that is something that allows you to have more opportunity. Okay, so keeping in mind that all it takes is that one. I remember when I was going through a funk, trying to get my career kickstarted. Probably I was like 16. I'd already had a successful career, but then it kind of dropped and I was struggling to get work. And then basically one of my old connections, like someone I worked with when I was like 14 years old on Team Fortress. He ended up working at a studio in Sydney, Australia, and I mentioned like, yeah, I've been trying to get work, blah, blah, blah. Showed him my new reel, just more showing him like, here's what I've been up to. And he's like, man, this is cool. Can I show it to my boss? I was like, yeah, that'd be freaking awesome. He showed it to him. Within like a day, I got an email back saying, would you like to move to Sydney? Would you like to work for the second biggest studio in Australia? And that was a dream come true, which I didn't take until years later, just because I think I was 15 at the time. And I didn't want to move to Sydney just yet. So the thing is that connection, even though actually it is valid that I mentioned this, because even with that connection, it actually worked out really well, because even though I didn't accept the job right away, I kept in contact and I kept that flame stoked. I would email every few months and just say, hey, how's it going? Check in, and projects would come up. I would go work somewhere, and then like when things finished up, I could email and say, hey, I'm actually going to be free in a few months. And again, offers would be made. And eventually I was sick of my job when I was 17. And I said, I'm ready to move. And it's like, well, great. We have a few things coming up. Nothing is for certain. However, let's just bite the bullet. Come on down and we'll work it out. And because I'd kept that relationship going for a while, it was never about like, come for a job interview. It's like, we want to hire you. We've kept in contact for this long. And all it took was that one connection to get me into TV and into film. And that, in a way, I really kind of look at that job as being the one that really kickstarted my whole career. I'd been doing quite well in my career up until that point, but that was a massive game changer in so many different ways. And it all came from that one connection years before that I randomly spoke to, and it turned out he passed on my work, and then everything fell into place. But actively making connections with people, reaching out everywhere you can, finding Facebook groups, finding forums, everything, talking to people, you never know. I remember a guy actually, he just contacted me the other day, but 10, 15 years ago, I don't know, like I think he had just gotten let go from his current job, and he was on the 3ds Max beta forums and basically wrote what looked to me like a very drunken, sad post about life sucks and I want to change my life and my industry and blah, blah, blah. And basically posted some of his work. And one of the studios in Canada, this is Australia, so one of the studios in Canada, Frantic Films, one of the head lighters there, saw the post on the forum, was like, dude, I'll pass it on to the higher ups. And within a few months, he had moved to Canada. He's working on X-Men 2 and all these other really cool projects. And everything changed. It all came from his sad, drunken, I assume miserable post on like a private forum. So again, you never know what could happen, and it all comes down to the more opportunities you create for yourself, the more that's going to happen. So I realized that like this is just more me firing out lots and lots of stuff and kind of seeing what sticks. But really, it does come down to that. It comes down to networking is way more critical than your skills, because your skills is something that, again, you want to be able to showcase so you can do it all, but it doesn't mean that you need to have 10 years of previous experience to get the job. If you can show that you can do the job by showing an end results, so focusing on one good shot or 3 good shots, whatever it's going to be, that is way more important than trying to showcase a large assortment of stuff. If you can do one thing really well, that's what you'll probably end up getting the job for, and using whatever you can leverage in the beginning as a stepping stone. If you want to get into effects from architecture, you don't necessarily just jump right in, you build a strategy around that. But the biggest thing is to figure out your obstacles, so that way you can squash them, you can focus on the areas that are your weaknesses, and that way they're not weaknesses anymore. If you're able to put in the time, and by doing that, you need to create the time. So by putting in that extra hour in the morning, like getting up at 6 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. to do 1 hour of training, do some tutorials or whatever, or going to sleep an hour later, spending weekends learning shit, even 5 hours a week, using your lunch breaks to go and have lunch with other companies around you, getting to know everyone. Those are all things that are really going to give you or create more time to allow you to go and focus that on overcoming those obstacles that are in the way. So lunches with other studios, or organizing industry drink mixes, or finding out where people are, going to SIGGRAPH or E3 or GDC or whatever the events are that are going to be useful for you to get to know and meet other people. That's going to be important. Going online, making friends there, whatever it takes, because all it takes is that one. And if you find that one person, that's going to be really critical for you to be able to take the next step and hopefully get opportunities to work somewhere. At the same time, when you're working all this stuff, the fact that you have a full-time job means that you don't have the pressure of, I need to do something in the next few weeks. It means that you've got time. You're financially backed. So even working for free, which I've talked about before, but like there are going to be times when working for free can be something where the currency that you get is the fact that you're getting experience, you're getting opportunities, you're investing. Like the payment you're getting is the investment in yourself long term. So if you were to say get like a job, like you would email every studio and say, I want to be a render farm manager, I'll work nights. In other words, I'm just going to sit there and watch the network, and anytime like a render crashes, I'm just going to requeue it or contact someone if it's erroring out. That typically is a low paying job or doesn't pay at all, but it's an opportunity to get some experience. And I've seen people do that and then not take advantage of it. Whereas I've seen other people who do that and then they're sitting there watching a screen to see if it errors or not. So using that time to actually do something productive, like work on some cool stuff, and at the very end of it say, hey, I was working on a bunch of stuff. Like whenever you get a chance to talk to the head of 3D or one of the leads, you can say, yeah, like last night I built this character, or last night I worked on this thing, or I was kind of playing around with the animation rig for one of these shots and I made my own animation. What do you think? This is a chance where you've actually got face time with all these professionals. They know who you are and they're essentially working with you. This is a chance for you to actually leverage that time to get your foot in the door where you wouldn't typically have access to those people because you're sending in a resume, they don't know who the hell you are. So again, creating opportunities is a big one. And if you don't have the experience, just going online, going on websites and saying, hey, I can do the work, or I'm just doing it for the experience. So, I don't mind getting paid. If in return I can, get a reference letter from you or whatever. And again, I don't want anyone to kind of think that this is the standard way to apply for work. Because if you're just going around everywhere, like going on forums saying, hey, everyone, I want to work for free. I'll do whatever it takes to get my foot in the door. That's going to do more damage than good for you and for everyone else as well. So what makes way more sense is privately in certain situations where what you are seeking is the experience. This is when it's okay to do that. This is where it's okay to say, look, I need the experience. I'm looking to do, to move in this industry. I can do the work. Give me the opportunity, no cost, just give me a reference at the end of it. And, or better yet, let me do this for free. And if it works out, give me a job, whatever it's going to be. These are ways you're creating opportunity for yourself again. And there's so many. I kind of figured this would be me just kind of like, I wanted to kind of rattle on and throw out a bunch of ideas, more to kind of touch base on this. But at the same time, this is something that I do when I have a bit more time, kind of want to sit down and kind of build a much more longer form, to the point plan on it. But as I said, this is kind of more throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, as the expression is. But it's a good opportunity to kind of start the conversation, because for me, already email-wise, I'm getting hundreds of people emailing me with like a lot of their obstacles, a lot of their goals, a lot of the things that they want to do, but not quite sure how to approach it. And I would love to hear from you and kind of get your take on where you're at in your career. So, I mean, if you want to leave a comment in the show notes, and I'll give a link to that in a moment, that would be great for me, because I want to see how people respond to this, where they're at in their career right now, where they want to be later on. And from there, I can build a bit more of an elegant solution, but I just want the conversation to kind of be started right now. So, like I said, right now, there is no excuse. With the internet, I love how beautiful it is that it doesn't matter who you are, race, sex, age, whatever it's going to be, you can go and get work. There's no bias out there when it comes to getting work online and going through getting work on the internet. I'll say that most of my early career, I never had any pictures, photos, or anything posted of myself online. And I did that specifically because I was like 16. And, I had this one guy, guy out of college that I was like using the labs when I was like 14. His name was Matthew Sweet. I'm going to say that because I've looked him up since and I can never find him anywhere. So I don't mind mentioning that. And like this guy, he was 21 years old and he was telling me that, you know what, like because of your age, no one's ever going to take you seriously. He's like, I'm 21 years old and nobody takes me seriously at all. And, it's bullshit because I'm so great and blah, blah, blah. And I just remember thinking about that later on because I took that very seriously. But at the same time, I never had that problem. I was 17 when I was lecturing at college with people who are 40 years old paying $30, $40, $50,000 to sit in a room and listen to me talk, and not a single person ever had an issue with my age. I've never had any issues ever where people were like, well, you don't know what you're talking about because you're 14 or because you're 18 or whatever. But I still took it seriously. I still thought that maybe that's a disadvantage of mine. So I never posted any images of me. It wasn't until I was like 21 years old that bit by bit, stuff I had to do for whatever PR stuff that people needed a photo. I'm like, okay, here's one, and stuff would kind of get out. And like, I remember being at SIGGRAPH in 2003 and meeting all these like really big name artists at Pixar and ILM and other places. First I met like Brandon Davis, Neil Blevin, and Ted Boardman, and all these other Bobo, like all these other people, and they were all like, wait a minute, you're a kid. And it was just funny to kind of hear everyone's description in their mind of me. It was like, I was 50 years old with like a long beard, and this is pretty consistent. Everyone thought that. And by me eliminating what I thought was a disadvantage, people would kind of fill in the gaps themselves. It was never a concern about my age. At 14, I was able to work on Team Fortress 2, which didn't come out for 10 years, but like Half-Life, always big video games. And, I did meet some of the people at the companies, but a lot of times I work from home, and that just never was an issue. So I just say all this because there are no limitations, especially when it comes to the internet. So if in the beginning, to get that initial work experience, just to get good, you can actively take all the small jobs, the things that are going to give you at least some kind of credible resume, which again, resumes aren't important, but when you are out of your 20s, it is kind of good to, start to kind of flesh that stuff out, because you do need to kind of leverage what you can. So like I said, I'm just kind of throwing some stuff out there, but I'm kind of hoping that some of this stuff does resonate with a lot of you. And I realize too that like not everyone is switching careers, but like I said, after going through thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people, that was something that I did find to be really reoccurring. And even though I'm spending a lot of time, like I literally spent all of today and all of yesterday crafting a very detailed email that I wanted to share on the inner circle. And because of that, it's just finally now I'm like, okay, time to actually talk about this stuff as well. But that is something that I kind of feel like is definitely a very important, vital subject that I'm hoping will resonate to a lot of people, but is also in line with a lot of what I have coming up. So there's going to be a lot of 3D training. I've actually got a lot of new visual effects training I'm going to be putting out very soon. Live action specific, some Houdini stuff as well. There's a lot of things in the works that are going to be coming out very soon. But at the same time, I want to really focus as we get close to the end of the year on making changes to our careers as we move forward. Because a lot of people, I was talking with one of my employees today about this, because he was looking at a lot of social media posts, and he's just like, man, we'll put out like a post just to a small audience as a test, and even though it's only going out to a couple hundred people, whereas like we'll put out another post, and this one is going out to like a few thousand people. The smaller one will do like way better than the bigger one. In other words, people care more about the video and how to click the buttons than they do about what it's going to take to actually get that pay rise, or to be able to negotiate your way to work on set, or whatever it's going to be. And as much as I get it and I understand it, at the same time, it still frustrates me that a lot of us want to learn the ZBrush tutorial over wanting to really invest in how to, let's say, negotiate a pay rise 4 times in 1 year, as one of the students in my mentorship did recently. All these sorts of things. It's just, that's like the really solid foundation that we really want to invest in. But instead, we go for the cheap tricks, the stuff that's going to be fun to do short term, but in the long term isn't going to make as bigger impact as some of the bigger picture stuff that we should be focusing on. So that's kind of something that I always look at it with a bit of frustration, is like, I know how vital it is to really improve our careers and really invest in ourselves. As much as doing all the 3D training is, I've got a lot of that coming out. There's also a lot of things that I want to invest a lot more time in because with a lot of you, because I think this is so critical. That all being said, I will wrap things up. I feel like this is going to be the weirdest episode. I'm going to look back and be like, oh man, I was high on painkillers from dental surgery without even realizing, or something's going to come up. But let's just see how it goes. But if you want to leave a comment in the show notes, just go to www.alanmckay.com/67. So it's episode 67. At the same time, if you want to join the Inner Circle, there'll be a link on there. Otherwise, just go to that link. There'll be a link on there to sign up for the Inner Circle. There's so much content coming out. I'm actually going to put out a 15-hour training series on visual effects in the next 2 weeks as well. So that's another thing that's coming up too, in addition to just a lot of really cool content that I'm really proud of and I really want to put out there. I'm putting more time in that than I am in anything else at the moment. So I'm excited about this. At the same time, more episodes coming up. Next episode I'm going to be touching on a couple of really cool subjects. I'll leave this one as a bit of a surprise, but the one directly after that, episode 69, is going to be an interview with Andre Cantrell from Uncharted Territory. He was the CG supervisor on Independence Day Resurgence, as well as like White House Down and 2012, a lot of other really cool projects. That episode is really awesome. I'm really excited about that. There's lots of cool stuff coming up, so stick with it, and I will be fully recovered after this week, so that will be also a good thing. All right, so thanks again for listening, and again, go to the show notes, www.alanmckay.com/67, and leave a comment. I'd love to know what you think of this episode. Hopefully there's a few key takeaways. At the same time, like, mention or email me if you want it to be a bit more personal, but I'd love to know like what your current goals are, like where you're currently at in your career and where you want to be, but more importantly, what are the things standing in your way that are preventing you, or you think are preventing you from actually achieving those goals that you set out. So that being said, I will wrap things up. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Rock on.